The crush of data weighing on a modern organization is causing enterprise IT to look for more flexible, cloud-like data management solutions. This transformation demands architects look at replacing traditional proprietary IT infrastructure with innovative new systems. Our Solutions Spotlight team took a look at this challenge and filed this report.
It's the problem everyone is talking about, and the challenge that enterprises know they must address now. The avalanche of data pouring into IT systems is applying a load pressure that is straining the limits of traditional IT architectures and threatening the management of business data. Virtualization offers a powerful and flexible way to accommodate this explosion of data and apps, but creating and deploying virtual servers, storage, and applications across private and public clouds for hybrid environments introduces its own unique set of challenges. Dramatic new data center design strategies are needed now in order to keep pace with this seismic shift in demand. According to a recent Intel forecast, between 70 and 80% of systems deployed into data centers 10 years from now will be what the company calls scale computing systems. In recent years, a new data center architecture model evolved to replace the expensive traditional model of scaling up and continually buying more racks of hardware. Organizations can now choose to dynamically scale out their storage environments using software-defined components. Using a scale-out architecture for secondary storage allows for costs that are more predictable, avoids being tied to a single hardware vendor, and delivers more predictable performance. Instead of facing costly forklift upgrades to address data growth, scale-out architecture delivers easier upgrades, greater resiliency, uninterrupted availability, and better IT agility. With a scale-out solution, compute and storage capacity scale either independently or in lockstep. This architecture keeps server, storage, network, and other resources separate. The scale-out data center movement is being driven by the benefits organizations are realizing when using the public cloud, from companies like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. That same level of flexibility, scale, and predictability is also needed to deliver a new level of benefits to business applications and data residing in on-premises infrastructure. Many organizations are faced with having to maintain applications and data on-premises rather than migrating from the cloud for a number of reasons. The application may be too complex or expensive to migrate, it was never designed for the cloud, or due to governance or regulatory requirements. The modern data center is a dynamic environment, and companies should not be held back by past investments in hardware or structure, but rather look to new data management solutions that can transfer the environment and unlock all of its potential.
Now, I'm here with Commvault's Director of Solutions Marketing, Lance Shaw, one of our sponsors. Lance, thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Ashley. Thank you.
Now, tell me, what are some of the triggers that people may be seeing that would lead them to believe that their infrastructure is a problem?
Well, there's a couple of things that we see typically with customers. One of them is, one of the triggers is simply the fact that they're facing a refresh of their existing hardware. That renewal is coming up, and it can cause companies to take a step back and say, wait a second, why am I paying so much for this on a regular basis? Is there a better way? Another trigger that often happens is simply the fact that applications themselves are being refreshed. A lot of the data that's driven in an organization is coming from critical business applications, and there's more and more of them. So as these applications grow and as they're spinning out more data, it forces an organization to take a hard look at how they manage the secondary storage associated with those applications. And while there are others, certainly cost is always an issue. I mean, that always comes up for an organization. How can I do more with the same or sometimes less? But what we also see is as organizations are looking at moving to the cloud and transforming how they do business, that causes a look at the broader set of infrastructure and how they manage data across this increasingly large number of repositories and locations. Because as companies move to the cloud, they're not just moving to one cloud in most cases, they're moving to several. So there are really a number of different triggers that will get organizations and the IT management thinking about how they can manage data better, both now and in the future.
And as they're thinking about this, I'm sure it's affecting their everyday business flow in addition to just being a problem in itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the bigger problems as we just think about naturally as information silos are scattered across various locations or various regions of the world, it becomes increasingly difficult to make really complete and effective business decisions. And so that naturally has an impact on a business overall productivity and individual efficiency, because many times organizations, or individuals I should say, they want to be able to quickly find or retrieve data and locate that data on their own. They don't want to log an IT ticket per se and wait a few days until that data is retrieved. Businesses are moving much too quickly, your competitors are moving quickly. You have to be able to react to changing business scenarios and be able to make decisions more effectively. So that's a big driver for that.
And earlier you had mentioned secondary storage, and I'm hearing a lot about this secondary storage, secondary infrastructure. Can you dig in on that a little bit and tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. So I think when you look at the data used across an organization, like I mentioned how applications really drive how you run a business. People think about the business applications they use. They're talking about their CRM system, their ERP systems. Those systems, really they're using primary storage, but they utilize a lot of secondary storage, whether it be for backups, for archives, for the object stores that are referenced in those applications, and you're making multiple copies of data for either testing or for disaster recovery. So there's a number of scenarios that generate a lot of secondary data. In fact, we've seen in our research and with customers that the amount of secondary storage can be 50 to 70% of the overall volume of the data. So if you can get that secondary storage under control and manage it more effectively and reduce those copies and simplify the management of that in the process, it's a huge opportunity for savings, and both now and in the future. It gives you, and also I should mention, you have the opportunity for a lot more flexibility, because no one says, hey, my data, I think it's going to be shrinking. It's going to be a lot less data in a couple years. That's not happening, right? It's all about data growth, and so you have to be able to predict, or at least have a system in place to be able to react to data growth over the coming years.
So you mentioned flexibility and cost savings. How can you help them harness that?
Well, I think frequently they go hand in hand, right? Flexibility is key if you're going to drive cost savings. One of the scenarios that I mentioned earlier, but we see a lot, is that organizations get themselves locked into a particular vendor. A lot of times organizations, they hit that trigger we mentioned earlier. It's time to renew the contract for my storage. And that means getting out the checkbook, right? And what I'd rather do is have the flexibility to use the hardware I want. And not only at that point in time, but also be able to dynamically update and improve my storage infrastructure as I need to throughout the course of a year. So not being forced to anticipate at the moment I sign that contract what I might need 3 years from now. Okay. I don't always know, and I can't anticipate all those changes. Secondarily, when it comes to flexibility, you want the flexibility to move the data where you would like to, and that often means moving data to and from the cloud, because obviously more and more organizations are looking to extend their current IT infrastructure to incorporate the cloud. And so that flexibility means not just moving data back and forth to the cloud, but also moving it to different cloud locations, because increasingly organizations are using multiple cloud providers. So when you think about managing all that under one umbrella with these new locations in place, you really need a way to bring that all together and see where that data is and be able to move it all from a single location. And that in itself, giving that additional flexibility, that's where the cost savings come in. Because now I can move data where I need it to be, because sometimes I need to be more high availability location. I need to be able to archive it. I need to be able to push it out to the cloud. I'm looking to replace tape. There's a number of scenarios where I can realize cost savings in a more dynamic fashion with having that single place to go to move data where it needs to be.
Okay, and so how would you say that Commvault is approaching this situation and these problems?
Well, Commvault has a unique approach to data management in general. And with this new solution, we're allowing you to separate the management of the data and move that into a software level discussion and separate it from the hardware. So by decoupling that, now you have that flexibility we talked about. But not only that, you really have now with Commvault, you have a single place to go to be able to manage the information, to be able to see what's out there, to know what's out there, be able to place it in a particular location, and be able to use it more effectively for business decisions.
Now you mentioned the Hyperscale solution. Tell me, what are the key benefits?
There's probably 5 major benefits that are worth calling out here. I think the first one is that we allow you to seamlessly scale out to meet your data management and storage needs for secondary storage, right? I think the other one related to that, and we talk about seamlessly scaling out, is you get much greater flexibility in terms of the technology and the hardware that you're using in-house. I think probably the third one is really that we're helping you eliminate risk by providing our industry-validated solutions, whether that be the appliance or whether that be particular reference architectures that we provide you with for using particular hardware combinations. The fourth benefit is that you are able to get rid of point products that you previously had in place. We see this a lot with customers where they want to be able to get down to a minimal amount of solutions, or ideally one solution to manage their data. And finally, they want to be able to provide cloud-like services with their on-premises data for those applications that they can't move to the cloud.
And so cloud-like services, that's very interesting to our viewers. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I think the desire to move to the cloud is driven by the dynamic nature and the capabilities that I receive there, and the at least perceived cost savings that I can get by moving my data and my application information out to the cloud. But however, they may also certainly relate to the fact that in many cases, those applications can't be moved to the cloud. Maybe it's regulatory concerns. Sometimes it's just sheer size of the data. So what they'd like to be able to do is bring the ideas or the benefits of the cloud and bring those into their on-premises model. And by providing a secondary storage model on-premises, you now have that flexibility to dynamically scale out whenever the particular application or business demands.
So tell me, what does an early customer success story look like?
I would say maybe one that comes to mind is a consumer goods provider we've been working with here in the United States. They're a global organization, and they actually face some of the challenges or the triggers that we talked about earlier, right? They had recently been expanding in Europe, and they expanded their data center there, and the amount of data coming in into that system was much greater than they anticipated. In fact, it was so much that it was going to force them to do an out-of-band or out-of-regular schedule hardware refresh. And so, they talked to the vendor about it that was providing their hardware storage. And of course, predictably, the answer is, yeah, sure, buy more of our storage. We're happy to take your money, Mr. Customer. And when in fact, so this really got the customer to rethink their entire strategy and take a step back and say, how are we managing this information long term? And they needed a single management approach. As the company is going to continue to grow, obviously they're planning for growth. They want to be able to see the data across all those locations. They want to be able to dynamically expand how they manage their storage and provide that storage. And part of their strategy is to become more cloud-like in their own data center. So in applying those benefits to their on-premises data and their on-premises applications. So when they thought about all of those angles, that's when Commvault Hyperscale made even more sense to them, that this is going to give them a long-term strategy for managing data as their company continues to grow.
That's great. And all those things that you had mentioned, flexibility, scalability, cost savings, it's exactly what IT architects are looking for. And I think that this solution could be a great fit.
Turns out at the end of the day, yeah, driving down costs, being a more efficient organization, being more flexible, yeah, it's hard to argue with that, right?
It is. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
Certainly, over the next year, companies should take a hard look at their IT infrastructure and ask the question, are your systems going to scale with the elasticity and resiliency needed to handle the growing data demands of your organization? We hope this segment has given you some perspective on that. For Solutions Review, I'm Ashley Troutman.